farmers in the eastern, northern and western Cape region are being urged to look out for marauding locust swamps and report them immediately. Since September, a locust outbreak has followed seasonal rains in the Karoo region of these three provinces. So far, locust control contractors have been deployed to all the affected areas. Let's get you a sense of how widespread this problem is and if, in fact, it will spread to other provinces potentially. Our guests for this discussion are Agri SA Northern Cape Operations Manager Janine Byleveld. Also joining us is Dr. Ikalafeng Kgakatsi. There you go, who's the Director of Climate Change and Disaster Risk at the Department of Agriculture. To both our guests, thanks very much indeed for your time, and it's lovely to have you on the program. Dr. Ikalafeng, I wonder if I can begin with you. Just give us a national picture, really, of how widespread something like locust outbreaks are, especially after the rainy season in South Africa.
The widespread currently is through the Northern Cape provinces, Western Cape province, as well as the Eastern Cape province. But it can spread as well to Free State when it flies. So it's normally originated along the Karoo area. Following the heavy rains, the temperature is normally high in those areas. So when you receive good rains, the locusts are being experienced in those areas, and they hatch, and then they can after a couple of months they fly into throughout the country. And if they are not controlled on time, then they can cause havoc to the agricultural sector.
Yeah, I mean, the visuals that we're playing on our screen can send chills down anyone's spine. Janine, help us understand whether you get the sense that the affected communities and farmers know how to respond to a problem like this.
Yes, so I think the department is doing a great job in training these district locust officers, and they have foremen and some general workers working with them. All of these people are trained and fully skilled to do the work. From the farmer's side, they control it through a low pesticide applied with an ultra low spray formulation, and this is have a big effect on the locusts, specifically on the hoppers. That is the first when they hatch. There's hoppers, and that's when the most effective to control them, because the pesticides are most effective at that stage. When they grow, it's about a 78-day cycle that the locusts go through, and it's very effective if we get them as early as possible to control the locusts.
Yeah, speaking about that, my understanding is that it's actually your province that sounded the alarm first around this latest wave of locusts potentially. What are you seeing so far?
Yes, so in the early stage, about 30 August, we have a few swarms that broke out, but then it was quiet for a while, and then from September there was a big outbreak since the start of the summer raining season, and this had a big effect around the Free Cape provinces. With the about 10 mils of rain, these kind of locusts can hatch, and they will break out as soon as they have enough fluid to wash away their wax seal, basically.
Depending on... Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Go ahead.
So from that point on, we have in our areas about 34 swarms per district locust officer per day that they have to control. So it's about from the November to December, it's about 1,400 swarms per district locust officer.
Sure. I'm no expert, but that sounds like a lot. Dr. Ikalafeng, perhaps let's talk about the potential impact that these swarms could have if, especially, they go unattended. One of the things that spring to mind is matters around food security in the country.
Yes, definitely they can affect food security. First thing is the grazing land. They can wipe off the land, the lucerne, as well as the open field. That's how they are not attended to. And they can also land on the crops, the maize, as well as any other crops that they can land on. And they can, within a day, they can wipe hectares of land. Within a few minutes or hours, 10 or 20 hectares, they can be cleaned by this flying locust. So this is really huge, and they can have a negative impact on the food security, especially when you look at Free State. That's one of the maize growing areas, and if it are affected, then it's going to be a huge impact, including some areas in Northern Cape as well as in Free State, that we can lose a lot of food security. So we need really to make sure that as soon as we see them, they are being notified and being reported, and they are controlled as soon as possible to make sure that the food security is less being negatively affected.
Is that something we need to worry about in South Africa, Dr. Ikalafeng? I mean, is the extent of this problem to such a scale that it does also pose serious threats to our own food security?
You see, this is not really occurring on a yearly basis. We last experienced this in 2010, and the other one was in 2000. So it's sort of a 7 to 10 year cycle that we are experiencing. And because the region are normally the high temperatures, and then during those years when we are receiving good rains or heavy rains, and these eggs are hatched, they can lay dormant for years, 10 years, like now that we are receiving. But as immediately when they started being hatched, then it becomes a cycle that every after maybe 2 to 3 months, the eggs are laid, and then it keep on rolling. Like now, we expect to keep on controlling them until next year around winter, when the temperatures are cold, and then because at the time now the eggs won't be hatching. And if you can be expecting a good rains as well, this you can go again to 2022-2023 season that we experienced last year. 2010 year, it took us on 3 seasons, 2010 to 2013 when we were experiencing them, and then it ended there, and until 2020 when we were receiving them. So this is the period that during that time it can really affect our food security. But if we are really been controlling them with our partners, Agri unions, we have been effectively doing well throughout those years.
This is actually fascinating, despite how important an issue it actually is potentially. Janine, you've already spoken to us about, for instance, how important it is to intervene while the locusts itself are at the hopper stage. I've read something along the lines of there being various hopper stages, and I presume after the hopping stage, the locusts fly and things become a whole lot more complex. How better are we getting at being able to understand these locust swarms and therefore being able to respond to them appropriately?
So I think the department has done a lot of research in the past years regarding the locusts, and there is 5 different stages that they develop into. In the stage where they are in the flyer mode, it's very important that they get babysit throughout the day, and when they go and nest in the evenings, the DLOs will control them at that stage, because it's not possible to control them throughout the day when they're flying. So it's throughout the day they will just drive with the swarm. With the wind speed, it depends on where they will land in the evening. There's a variable about 16 kilometers that it can differ from the start to the finish. And the swarms are very big. It's about, some of them are 2 to 3 kilometers. It looks like eclipse of the sun, that it gets dark where you stand. So that is how big it can get. I don't think everybody will ever imagine how big a swarm can be.
Yeah, we've spoken a lot about the threats that they pose specifically to agriculture and crops. Should we be worried about the threats they pose to humans? I'm thinking especially babies who don't really understand what's going on and may very well find themselves in an awkward situation.
I think luckily the swarms, they gather more in the rural areas and not necessarily in towns. So they will fly over the town, but they won't overnight necessarily always. It depends on the conditions of the day and the temperatures. But to humans, it's not really a threat. In northern African countries, they use these locusts as a meal substance, as protein. So it is healthy to eat as well. But yeah, it's difficult when it's this kind of thick swarms.
Janine, Byleveld is the Agri SA Northern Cape Operations Manager. Also joining us there, Dr. Ikalafeng Kgakatsi, who's the Director of Climate Change and Disaster Risk at the Department of Agriculture. To both our guests, thanks very much indeed for your time. This was actually quite insightful, at least if I say so myself.